Hi guys, it's Dan, and in this week's vlog episode, we're talking all about the hamstrings and why we should stay away from stretching the hamstrings and also strengthening them on their own, just doing some isolated strengthening work. So I want to talk a little bit about why this is. I appreciate that might sound a little controversial because it's very common. You know, we feel like our hamstrings get tight and we want to stretch them, and we do some strengthening exercises specifically for the hamstrings. But I'm going to get into why that shouldn't be the case, why we should probably stay away from that, and what we should be doing instead. So with the hamstrings, what the primary role is to help with hip extension. So they help the glute max. So your glute, this big muscle on your backside, that is the primary, that's like almost like your primary mechanism of propulsion, so to speak. So whenever you walk or run or step or do like a step up or a lunge or a deadlift or a squat, it's that guy, that's what's going to be driving you back up. So whenever you do a squat, again, it's those glutes that bring you back up. If you're doing a deadlift, again, it's those glutes that are going to extend the hip to bring you back up. Or if you run, again, you're going to push off that back leg. Again, it's that glute that's doing most of the work. The hamstrings are what we class as a synergist muscle. So they just help out. They assist the glutes with that hip extension. They have some of their own roles as well. They also stop that whenever we're walking or in gait, they stop this forward leg swing. So whenever we step forward, again, they slow down this lower leg swing forward, again, because they flex the knee. So again, that's going to help to optimize the position of the foot so that we can strike with the heel, and again, we can accept and dissipate those forces coming up from the ground efficiently. So that's a little bit around the hamstring. We have three different hamstrings. We've got the biceps femoris, which is this lateral hamstring, which runs up this side. We've got the semimembranosus and tendinosus, which are more on that medial side. Okay, so we've got a few there. Again, with our common postural dysfunctions, okay, so these are the movements that were very predictable. So if there is some impairment of the lower body, so that especially around the lumbo-pelvic hip complex, again, we have, if there's anything that's not quite right or moving as well as it is, we have these very predictable patterns of moving. And these muscles have very predictable patterns of behavior. And typically with the hamstrings, they more often than not tend to become long. So they actually get lengthened, okay? So they don't need to stretch them. And they become what we class as overactive. So they have, the central nervous system is recruiting them too much. They're too active, they're too involved in the movement that we're doing. They have too much drive, too much tonicity. So that's its typical behavior. So again, if we go back and use our objective postural assessment, our objective measure, so that could be our overhead squat assessment. If you've seen those videos I've done on the various postural dysfunctions that we fall into, I've kind of done one for each major dysfunction, but definitely for the lower leg and the lumbo-pelvic hip. So anything from the pelvis downward, you'll see that the hamstrings are always involved in the dysfunction in some way, especially if we've got things like knees bow in, so our knees start to collapse this way. Okay, so if we're doing an overhead squat assessment and we see the knees collapse in, or we see the feet turning out, or we have this anterior pelvic tilt. So again, we have this curve in our spine, our pelvis drops down this way, and again if we start to collapse forward, they're all signs that would implicate the hamstrings as being in a lengthened position. Okay, so they're not short now, they're lengthened, and also they're overactive. So with the glutes in those positions, and all of those signs, so knees bowing in and excessive forward lean and the anterior pelvic tilt, the glutes are actually being inhibited. So they're actually in a lengthened position, but they're shut down. And we have this concept which we call synergistic dominance. So remember I said about the hamstrings are a synergist muscle, they help out. Well, if there's a dysfunction, the prime mover, okay, so again, if I've had that anterior pelvic tilt again, that's my hip flexors that are pulling me into that position. They're kind of tilt me forward. That's now going to lengthen out my glutes, and because these have more activity, that's going to shut my glutes down. And whenever the prime mover shuts down, the synergist muscles, and in this case, the hamstrings, will then take over and try to do the load, try and take on the load of the glutes. A bit like a tug of war. Again, if everyone's pulling again, and then your biggest, strongest person just says, "I'm not doing it anymore," and they walk off and leave. All those other guys, all those synergist pullers, they all have to work even harder. And that's the same kind of scenario which happens here with the hamstrings. Plus, also, again, they're in that lengthened position. So the last thing we want to go do is start stretching them, because if we lengthen them even further, it's going to make matters worse. They're going to produce even less force. And that's just going to exacerbate that dysfunction even more. So again, we don't want to be stretching those hamstrings. And again, more specifically, it's the bicep femoris, that lateral hamstring. That's the one that tends to be the main player in all this. The other hamstrings, the semi-muscles, they're not so implicated. They actually tend to be more underactive in a lot of situations. But it's that bicep femoris, that's the one that we really want to shut down. So we have to kind of bear this in mind. Again, we're only going to know this. We're only going to know if that bicep femoris, that lateral hamstring is implicated, if we have a movement assessment. So again, you can check that overhead squat assessment. Again, I've done it in those videos. I'll walk you through how to do it, the setup, and you can record yourself and see if you have those signs. Okay, so if you are feeling some tightness in that hamstring, do that assessment. Record yourself, see what happens, or even better, go and see a movement professional, and they will assess you, maybe either using the overhead squat assessment or some kind of objective measure, and then that can give you some information to see, and again, it will test to see what dysfunction you have, and again, if that hamstring is implicated. Again, we can't just rely on those facts. Again, we're not great at interpreting what we're feeling. Again, it might be a clue, might be an indicator, but pain or anything uncomfortable could be coming or could be driven from any number of structures. Again, we can't just go, "Oh yeah, it feels tight, I'm going to stretch it out." Again, based on what I've just kind of gone through, and again, using and based on those predictable patterns of dysfunction and those compensation patterns that we adopt if there's something that's not quite right, those hamstring muscles, they're lengthened, and again, they become very overactive. So again, we have to address them in a specific way. So what can we do for the hamstrings? Well, what you can do is we can do release techniques. So again, if you had a movement assessment done and it was shown that the hamstrings were overactive, we can calm them down, so to speak. We can reduce their activity doing release techniques. And again, I've done those in some of those videos, and I'm going to quickly show you now. So again, I could use the massage ball here. I'd have to be seated to do this, because if I've got my legs lengthened doing it with a foam roller, again, I'm still putting a lot of tension through the hamstring. It's be hard for it to calm down. But if I sit on the chair, again, I'm going to go after that bicep femoris. I'm going to go for that lateral hamstring. Again, I'm just going to find that tender spot. If you saw that last week's vlog episode where I went through the protocols and how to use the foam roller or the massage ball, what the specific protocols are, you can check that video out, or just check the playlist that I've done, which has this technique in it. But again, I'll quickly show you now. Again, I'm just going to find that tender spot on that muscle, on that bicep femoris, sit there and just hold it and wait for it to relax and go away. Again, it normally takes 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And again, that will get that muscle to calm down and shut down. The other thing we don't want to do, that we have to be careful with, again, is any isolated strengthening for the hamstrings, because again, that's just going to increase the activity of that muscle again. So I don't want to stretch it. Again, that can make things worse. I don't want to strengthen it because it's already long, so I can't stretch it anymore. It's already overactive, I can't strengthen it anymore. But what I can do is address all the other issues involved. So again, if I had like an anterior pelvic tilt, I could address my hip flexors. And again, I really want to get that glute working, because don't forget, that's the prime mover. Whenever we do, again, like our deadlift or squats or run, that's what should be doing most of the work. So I need to this is all about optimization. So again, if I can release the hamstrings, that's going to optimize the amount of activity that should have. If I can activate the glutes, that's going to optimize the amount of activity that should have. And then I want to get back to, again, let's move away from those hamstring exercises and think about integrated function, because that's how our body moves. Our body moves again all in an integrated pattern, in a very integrated way, because it is just an integrated system at the end of the day. So we want to get back to doing lunges and squats and step ups, or whatever exercises within your capability to do, because that's going to have a much bigger carryover to function. Again, it's going to get everything working as it should do. Again, it's not going to, you know, over target certain muscle groups, which could lead to, again, dysfunction. Again, everything kind of gets its equal share. Everything works in proportion to what it should do. Again, if we do a squat, again, it should be the glutes, so it should be doing most of the work for hip extension. Again, the hamstring should be helping out. Those sorts of things are going to have a much better carryover to function, a better carryover to sport and activity. Again, if your goal is weight loss, you know, I can tell you now, doing a squat, doing a lunge is going to work a whole lot more muscles compared to the leg curl and the leg extension. So we're going to, again, we're moving bigger rocks. We get a much bigger bang for our buck. And again, we get all those additional benefits. So again, if it's weight loss, if it's building more lean muscle mass, those bigger movements are going to be way better. Again, it's also going to optimize our function, keep us moving the way we should do. So again, these are all things to consider. So just to summarize again, let's leave the hamstrings alone. Let's have a movement assessment done. Okay, let's see if the hamstrings are even an issue. Let's do that first, and if they are, let's address them appropriately. It's always going to be release techniques. Again, you know, we're going to release them and then leave them alone. And again, let's work on the structures that really do need addressing, that really do need strengthening. Again, if it's anything for lower body, it's normally, again, especially for this lumbo-pelvic hip region, it's going to be the glute complex. That's what really needs the work, not our hamstrings. Let's just kind of leave that to the side. Let's optimize movement. Let's do it based on an objective measure, not just by what we're feeling. You know, that's not good enough. We need to let's do it properly. And again, if we can do that, again, that's going to help us move much better. It's going to get us out of pain, get us out of discomfort. It's going to prevent future injury as well. So let's just do it properly. Let's do it right. So hopefully you guys have found that helpful. Hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, so again, a little bit of input about maybe things we need to start optimizing and changing around. Let's leave the hamstring stuff alone, and let's get back to, you know, doing what we should be doing. And again, have that movement assessment done and optimize based on the outcome, or based on what that's telling us. Again, great job. So thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please email me at danbryanfitness@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll see you soon.